Needless to say, it never got done. This is a project for another day. Today is that day. Welcome back, Troglodytes, to your daily dose of guitar information, the Trogly's Guitar Show. If you've watched my end-of-year guitar collection videos, this Epiphone always shows up, and I tell you, it was my first good guitar. My first guitar was actually this Stratocaster that I reviewed and documented in this episode, and then my second one was actually an Epiphone Les Paul Special too, but I'll never forget the day that my parents gifted me this. I mean, this was a huge gift. I know I have a crazy guitar collection nowadays, but growing up, getting a $600 guitar was insane. That was really expensive for my family, but I'm so appreciative that I was able to get this. It's such a cool Silverburst color. That was before Silverburst had all the Adam Jones hype behind it. I just thought it was the coolest finish. So this was my first good guitar. It was like really professional. I was super proud of it. And eventually I did get a full-on Silverburst Les Paul Custom, and I hated it. It was a $4,500 boat anchor that I didn't ever bond with, and I sold it within a couple of months. So in late 2014, in the early days of my guitar career, I parted out this 83 Studio Custom. So I had all these awesome vintage parts laying around, and I decided, since I didn't really like the expensive Gibson Custom Shop, what if I put Tim Shaw PAFs in here and try to convert it into an 80s custom? So I was basically trying to put vintage parts in here. I had to do additional like routing to the body, and it never got done, and I ended up ruining my first good guitar ever. So it's been a project forever that I'm just like, yeah, one of these days I'll get around to it. But Sweetwater reached out to me and they said, we would like to do a fun custom project with you. To which I said, you know what? I think I've got an Epiphone that would appreciate these mods. What we're going to do to this is not financially viable for most Epiphones, but since this one has sentimental value and is unusable in its current state, I thought this would be a great candidate. So let's go ahead and get my old friend sent off to Sweetwater and make it whole again.
Hey guys, this is Steven with the Sweetwater Guitar Workshop, and here we got one of Trogly's Les Pauls. It's clearly been loved for quite a while, and we're looking to totally restore it, refurbish it back to its former glory.
And a $2,000 repair bill later, restored it they did. But I haven't seen this thing in a complete form in like 8 years, so let's go ahead and get this thing unboxed. It was packed really well and sent back in the custom shop case that I sent this thing out in. Let's see my Epiphone complete. Oh man, that just looks so good. I have not seen this in its full glory. Those frets are fantastic. I remember the original frets, the Epiphones, they wear so fast. Like, I played a decent amount, but not enough to really expect fret wear. But wait till you hear everything we did on this thing. But first we have to start with my absolute favorite modification. I've got a kill switch. Buckethead in style. It should be momentary. It's in the correct position. It feels pretty good. But so far, it looks like they did a really sweet job on this. It's got all the scratching on the back still. And thankfully, FedEx didn't ruin it on its way back to me. So let's go ahead and throw this thing on the workbench to talk about what they did to this thing. All right, my baby's on the workbench. Let's see what they did to her. So, if you know anything about metric style parts that normally come on Epiphones, if you want to switch them into like Gibsons or other USA ones, they don't normally fit. That's why I had to like route additional areas out of this guitar, because I was trying to get those Tim Shaw PAFs to fit in here. Here's what this thing originally came with, pickup wise. It was nothing too fancy. Epiphone branded somethings. I mean, this is back before Epiphone got the whole revamp and their pickups actually sound really good. But I wasn't quite as much of a gear snob back then. I was just playing. But what set did I decide to go with here? I actually went with a 57 Classic in the neck. And in our bridge position, another 57. I'm a big fan of 57 Classics. Initially, I was going to go Seymour Duncan SH1 in the neck and an SH4 in the bridge, because that's a really nice hot set that I know sounds good. But since I have no intentions of ever selling this, I thought I'd go a little bit more traditional. Now, the downside of choosing those 57 Classics is the fact that they only come in nickel hardware, and everything else that we chose was chrome. It's just what the stuff came in. So they let me know about that, and I was like, well, honestly, I don't care. Most people won't even see the difference, but technically these are a little bit darker, and they will frost as they age a little bit more so than the straight up chrome. But in brand new configuration, you really don't notice it too much unless I point it out. And I could always change the hardware at some point in time if I really wanted to. But you're going to notice these aren't just any Gibson humbuckers, this is 4-conductor wiring. Sweetwater really wanted to show off what they can do here. They call it the Jimmy Page wiring harness. So you get push-pulls for coil splits, and then your normal circuit has 2 additional knobs here for in and out of phase in the middle position, and then you have series and parallel switch. Now, I really wanted a push-button kill switch on here, so we ditched the series parallel because I just don't ever see myself personally using that. Out of phase, okay, it's got its time and place. It's not completely worthless. So sorry, series parallel, you are now a kill switch. Now, I really wanted to go with the Sanwa kill switch, but they have more experience with Tessie, so far it feels pretty good. But I went for black. You know, it matches the vibe of this thing. I could have went Buckethead red, but it just wouldn't work. But it's actually really sentimental to me that I finally have one of my beginner guitars with a good kill switch on it, because right around the time I had purchased this, along with my stepfather and one of his buddies at work, I had modified one of my guitars, and we were going to put the kill switch in this one, but my mom was like, we just bought that thing, let's not tear up the good one. She was worried that this was the guitar that was going to happen to, but no, we did it on that cheaper one, and that installation job didn't turn out the best, but you know, it was okay for the time being. Here's an example of the kill switches that we were installing because I'd left one in its case. They're just small buttons. They didn't work very well. They had a very loud popping noise whenever you used them, so it was pretty much worthless. So it's kind of funny that it comes full circle that it got it, but at least it was professionally done. Because you gotta remember, pots are kind of small when they come through here, so this was a non-reversible modification. They had to ream that hole a little bit bigger in order to fit that in there. Oh, and I forgot to mention, we've got the Gibson speed knobs here. These are feeling really good. Now, in the past I've said I'm not really a big fan of push-pull electronics. It's mainly from a demoing standpoint. As far as like a studio recording guitar, I think it's nice to have. You don't always have to use it, it's just there. Oh, and don't worry, we upgraded the output jack too, so we should be good there. But within the circuit, we're rocking 7.63 k ohms in the bridge, 7.71 in the neck, and the middle just for fun, 3.83. And also keep in mind, we can half that with our coil split. But our in and out of phase, it won't show us anything different. But speaking of reaming and filling holes, I was talking to you guys earlier how Gibson plastics won't line up. You see what they've done here? They filled in the original Epiphone holes. Then they had to re-drill it for where the Gibson plastics would go. And so far it looks like they did a really clean job at that. Because some guys just leave them bare, or they just kind of sink the screw in crookedly like I would typically do. So it's nice to see that that was very professionally and tastefully done. And your average Joe wouldn't really notice the difference between Epiphone and Gibson USA plastics, but I see it and I love the visual upgrade on this guitar because we also went for a real Les Paul Customs pickguard. The multi-ply, it's what I'm used to seeing. It's nice on this thing. And it looks like we still have the Epiphone mounting style here, so we didn't go like Gibson, probably because they would have had to fill that hole in and then it might not have been stable, I'm not sure, but that should be a Gibson poker chip. But then when it comes to modifying a guitar, your next thing are your bridge and tail pieces. I always suggest just go locking because why not? So this is a Tone Pros locking bridge and tailpiece setup. Locking bridge and tailpieces have a set screw right here on each side. That then hugs this post so that it doesn't move. Now there's actually 2 different benefits to that. One being if you're changing strings on your guitar, this isn't going to accidentally fall off on you. You can pick the guitar up by that if you want. And other guys say that it gives you better sustain because, you know, it's more locked onto it. I just thought it was a great upgrade. And this is really funny. My guitar is so shiny and reflective, we can actually see the Tone Pros branding underneath it reflecting on the guitar. Now the tailpiece is the same way, they just have the set screws on the side. Again, it just locks it to the post right there, so if you're changing strings, it's not going to fall off. And there's the Tone Pros branding. Here's the original bridge to this guitar. I was always curious, why did it turn pink over here? It was a bright pink, but if you kept scraping it down, it would just turn into whatever this more like brassy color would be. Apparently I have acidic sweat and it eats through the cheap plating on the Epiphone products. So I kind of always associate this guitar with having a little bit of pink on the bridge. I might have to just paint it on our new one. But this is your typical Epiphone construction. I'd imagine it's some sort of pieces of a maple top with some sort of mahogany body, then some sort of a mahogany neck with some sort of a rosewood looking like fretboard. I'm not exactly sure what year this one is, but we can look at our serial number later. But they did a lot of work to this fretboard. So usually whenever they modify a guitar, it's very popular to have them roll the edges of the fretboard. What that does for you is it makes it a little bit less sharp. and just gives it a slightly worn-in feeling to it. So we're talking about this area right here. They just softened it up a bit. But this is a stainless steel refret, and they did a fantastic job. Essentially, the whole shtick behind stainless steel is the frets should outlast you, no matter how much you play the guitar. So no more soft Epiphone frets on this thing. Having stainless steel refret on this guitar is kind of hilarious. But I figure if we're going to go all out and go crazy on a guitar, we might as well do it. So now I'm going to have to play it a whole lot to see if that is the truth. But there's other guys that say it affects your tone, so we'll just have to see. But refretting a guitar is usually a fairly dangerous process because you can chip out the fretboard. Now, to be fair, ebony is the really brittle wood. Rosewood's usually a little bit easier than that, but so far I don't see any boo-boo areas. But here you can see some video footage of them working on this. I know this video is great because it's, hey, I sent it off, hey, here it is, it's all perfect. But there's a lot of man hours that go into doing something like this because they had to plane the fretboard down after they got the frets out. They had to re-radius, then insert the fret wire, level crown. I believe they plecked this thing. I could be wrong on that. The only thing I wish I would have asked them to do is replace the inlays with like real mother of pearl. I'm not sure if that's within their repertoire, but I bet they could do it for you if you wanted to. Now we're headstock. The only thing we couldn't Gibsonify is the truss rod cover. That's because stock from the factory, it's a 3-screwer, and you can't really turn that into a 2er without doing a whole bunch of stuff and then making it hard to access your truss rod. With this thing sitting without string tension for a while, I was kind of scared maybe the truss rod wouldn't be able to get it back into spec, but everything was fine according to them. And we upgraded it to locking Grover tuners with the Keystone style buttons. That's my personal preference. I love the Keystone style. Not as much of a fan of the Grover beans. This is all done up in chrome. So if you're new to the modification game, you pull them taut, you lock them on the back, you don't have to have all the winds around the tuner. It technically makes it quicker to get it set up properly than regular tuners. Our next upgrade here is the nut. They did a really good job on this. I did not expect them to actually match the Epiphone's yellowed binding, but I do believe this is an unbleached bone nut. So maybe that's why it has the yellow color, and that was just a coincidence. But if not, that's pretty cool. It looks the part. It doesn't even look replaced, but that's all professionally cut now. And now moving on to the back, these guys, they had a surprise for me. So I'm not gonna lie, I was pretty disappointed when they had suggested to use the Tessie kill switch, because Sanois is what Buckethead uses, right? And I've used them in the past, and I could understand their reluctance. If you look up Sanois kill switches, I mean, these are meant for arcade cabinets, not necessarily guitar installation. I mean, if that's what they're comfortable buying and installing, I wasn't gonna fight it too much. I would assume it would work just about as good. And there it is, they surprised me. They did go ahead and get the Sanois. But it looks like to get that kill switch in there, they might have had to route a little bit of wood out from the floor, not necessarily extend the cavity itself. It just barely fit in there. But that makes me very happy to see. But it looks like they're using those heavy-duty push-pull pots from CTS. So all the wiring in here looks as good as 4-conductor wiring can, right? When you're doing all this fancy stuff. That's quite a complicated wiring job. That's why people pay these guys to do that. Now the one caveat to this is you have to have 4-conductor wirings coming out of your pickups. If it's only 2-conductor, you can't do the fancy stuff. That's a far cry upgrade to what originally came in here. Although it does look like they used 500K pots originally. But I'll keep the original parts just for fun. All over here in this bag. And moving on from our electronics, we've got our toggle switch. Looks like pretty basic stuff in here. But now the story of the buckle rash. So growing up, we occasionally had some tiny dogs. But for whatever reason, there was a small period of time where we had a cat. And I could have swore it was that cat that scratched this guitar. I was so upset with that thing. So I never forgave that cat for that. But now that I know what I know now, it's possible that this isn't cat scratch fever. It might have just been something on my clothing. Probably a rivet in my jeans that I didn't realize could cause these scratches. But who knows, maybe I could be right, because this thing just sat on a stand. A cat could have scratched it up, but none of my other guitars were like this. That's my story behind whatever that stuff is. And getting it in the light just right, I think I can see this is a 3-piece body, because there's a pretty prominent seam line right here, and then another one like right there. And there is a little bit of lacquer sink forming, so you can see the mahogany-like wood grain. That's kind of hard to see in camera. And since we upgraded everything else on this guitar, we went for Schaller strap locks, the new S-Lock style. Moving on to the back of our neck, they did offer to matte the finish back here. Basically, they would just take some sandpaper and rub it down to make it a little bit smoother playing. Personally, I like the glossy feel, and I thought that would just be too much of a cosmetic difference between when I got it. I'll just let it wear naturally for now, but that is something they can do if you're interested. But apparently this was a limited edition Epiphone Custom shop, whatever that means. And looking up the serial number online, apparently it was made in the year 2008. So I would imagine I got it around 2009, maybe early 2010. I had purchased this out of the Fort Wayne, Indiana Guitar Center, because that was before I knew when Sweetwater was a thing. But man, going into guitar shops at that period of time was very scary to me, very intimidating. Nowadays, whenever I go into most guitar shops, it's like, I've got better stuff at home. But these are Locking Grover tuners. I think we initially went with these because they were going to line up just fine because it initially shipped with Grovers. Personally, I like Klusons the best, so that's why we went for the more Kluson style buttons, but still the Grover backs. Because that's pretty much the reason I prefer Klusons, is the style of tuner. Otherwise, I actually do prefer the function of Grovers. As far as the strings, we went ultra premium here too, the expensive elixirs. If you're looking for that slinky brand new feeling, I used to put those on all my personal collection guitars. I think they're like, what, $15 to $25 a set, depending on which version you go for. But they're well worth it. You don't have to change your strings as often. Otherwise, regular $5 set Diodarios are probably good enough for most people. All said and done, this one weighs 8 pounds, 9.5 ounces. Let's go ahead, plug it in, and hear how it sounds in its new form. We've had our kill switch fun, let's get some clean tones out of this thing. Don't forget, we can also coil split. I can see myself using that tone. I always like getting really percussive with the picking. Otherwise, I think I still prefer the humbuckers for most situations. Now, with any luck, this should be the out of phase. Yep, that's what that does. Gives you that kind of quackiness. Just remember, you can also coil split your out of phase. That goes from sounding like this to this. That one might be a bit too nasally for my taste. Now that we know all about my third electric guitar, what are my final thoughts on this thing after Sweetwater's restoration process? Holy cow, this is just like a completely different guitar. So now it kind of brings up the question, are you better off buying a Gibson Les Paul Standard or getting like a $600 Epiphone and having them do the exact same thing to it? Because I seriously am impressed by the way this thing feels. I think it's having Elixir strings once again. I do highly suggest trying those at least once because they have a very silky feel to them. I like them. But the stainless steel refret, these frets are just really slinky to play on. It transforms the feel of this thing because Epiphone frets, let's face it, stock, they're not the best. I mean, you can shine them up to make them nice, but having stainless steel on an Epiphone is just kind of absurd and awesome at the same time. But I thought the tones were very good, especially having the kill switch and the Jimmy Page wiring. That definitely makes it more versatile. But everything in here is like essentially the same as what they would have in a Gibson. I think it really comes down to the feel of the instrument. That's the only thing that's really dragging this thing back at this point, is maybe I should have had them take some of this thick poly finish off to give it that matte satin feel. Because that would be the biggest difference between getting one of these things and getting it all souped up by Sweetwater versus a Les Paul Standard, is the type of finish that they use. But I think as a gigging musician, it's kind of cool to have this because who's going to want to steal your Epiphone Les Paul Custom versus your Les Paul Standard? I think you're a little bit safer with this, even though under the hood, it's probably the more spec'd out guitar. And I guess if you're thinking about resale value, yeah, this is still maybe $1,000 Epiphone on a good day, but I'm never going to sell it. This is my guitar. That's why I chose this one to do the fun modifications to. So if you have a guitar project and you're in need of some help, Sweetwater's repair and restoration team is there for you. They are the ones who sponsored this episode, took my Epiphone, did all this expensive work in order to help me create this video. If you buy a guitar from Sweetwater, they can do it before they send it to you. You can get it plecked, you can put locking tuners on it, you can get it professionally set up whatever way you like it with the heavy gauge strings. They can swap out the pickups for you, or you can send in your own instrument if you want to have like the Jimmy Page wiring put in. So Troglodytes, I hope you enjoyed this fun high performance modification of my old Epiphone, getting it back up and running. And thank you to Sweetwater for doing all this. You can check their links in the description. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and we'll catch you tomorrow on the next episode. Take care. If you enjoyed tonight's episode, consider subscribing. I post videos like this every day. And you might even enjoy this next one.